Alright, so today I wanted to take some time to take a little retrospective at one of the more classic Ultra Magnus figures out there, Robots in Disguise Ultra Magnus. This one was originally released back in 2000, so that's 21 years ago as of this video, and we're basically going to take a look at how different he is from figures today and see if he's a good fit for your collection still. Now, bear in mind, he comes from a time when articulation and balance and a lot of things that matter today are sacrificed for more transformation gimmicks and whatnot. So we're gonna take a look at all of that today, but I did want to start in robot mode because I did see that a lot of the videos that are currently online start their videos with the alt mode going into the robot mode. But I wanted to start with the robot mode, number one, for the transformation, as well as to compare it to the other figures that are more commonly associated with Ultra Magnus, or rather the designs that are more commonly associated with Ultra Magnus. I also wanted to kind of pose him in this dynamic pose because this Ultra Magnus has very limited articulation and that you can't really do a lot with him. And while that might be true, a little bit of creativity can go a long way for when you play with your Ultra Magnus from 2000. But there are certain limitations to him that you guys should probably know about. So usually when he's seen in photos, he's posed like this. So I guess, yeah, we can start with this and talk about the different elements of the figure. Now, as you can see, the design is very, very different from the usual Ultra Magnus design that we know and love. In fact, I'm gonna bring in the McFans Toys version 2, which is very G1 accurate, just so you can kind of compare how different the looks are. It's practically a different robot, other than the fact that it was originally named God Magnus in the Japanese release and then made into Ultra Magnus once it was Americanized. There's really very few aesthetic similarities that you can barely tell from the robot mode that is meant to be Ultra Magnus. Like, I don't know, right off the bat, the stuff that I can tell you about is the head sculpt. I mean, with some imagination, it can pass for modified Ultra Magnus, I suppose. But the horns are certainly shorter and a bit more Optimus Prime-esque. He does sport a T on his chest, just like the regular Ultra Magnus or the usual Ultra Magnus is. But as far as the design goes, it's largely a different figure. So let's take a look at the figure itself in the design. So as you can see here, there's a lot of sculpted detail and he looks great as a display piece, but also, well, the common complaint is that he's basically 2/3 leg. And that's absolutely true, but it's mostly because of the functionality of the alt mode as well as the transformation into his combined mode with Optimus Prime. I'm not going to be able to cover that, but there are a lot of video reviews on the internet, on YouTube, that cover how he transforms with Optimus Prime, and those are pretty great reviews. If you ask me, you might want to check those out after. But focusing just on Ultra Magnus here, see, he has very hefty arms and hefty legs, but if you do turn him around, there's stability issues here because his legs are hollow. If these were walls, he's essentially leaning on 2 walls on each leg. So it's very easy to topple him over, especially because he's so top heavy. It doesn't help that the car carrier parts showing on the side are also very hollow, so it doesn't make for a very solid looking figure. But if you're just gonna display him like this, or the way I did earlier in the video review, then he looks amazing as is. But like I said, stability issues. You might want to support him if you're going to put him in an articulated pose. But don't get me wrong, I mean, I think he looks great. A little bit long on the leg part, but he does look great. There's a lot of different colored plastics used for this. I don't really see a lot of sticker work. Most of the paint work is either tampoed on or sprayed on, and it works really great for this figure. Not a lot of paint slop as well. Very, very well done. But of course, I think the eyes are stickered, if I'm not mistaken. So now let's talk about his articulation. You essentially have a dual swivel joint here. So you can either turn this around the entire way, or you can leave it down. And there's a ball joint here where the shoulder would be. And another ball joint here on the elbow. If you've managed to accidentally push too far or pull too far, these parts would just come off and you'd be able to pop them back on, no problem. So as you can see here, it's easily removable because of the ball joint assembly. Pop that back on. Okay, so the hands are interesting because they're also on a ball joint and have one articulated thumb and the rest of the fingers come together. So now let's take a look at the head. The head can move a little bit upwards and downward, but not by much. But you can extend that by dislodging this part right here if you want. Can look lower if you want, but that's because of this transformation assembly over here. Now, interestingly, while he can move his arms upward like this, you can also do it like this. Double joints all the way in terms of the arms. Then you have a ratchet assembly for the hips. Very, very clear here. And you can also turn the legs, but they don't do much. But they do help with articulation. There's a knee joint ratchet as well, although it does take a bit of doing to position it. So if you wanted to move your figure a certain way, you can. But like I said, if you want to have him stand, you're going to want to support the figure with something else. So you can get him in some pretty dynamic poses, to be honest. It's just that you won't be able to actually support said poses. See, he just crumpled. You won't be able to support those poses by just literally having him stand. So you're gonna need some level of support, like maybe a stand of some sort, in order to make this work. That's why a lot of people just basically have him stand like this. But if you're creative enough, you can kind of position him in such a way that he doesn't fall over all that much. So like this. Okay, so another thing that I need to note is that he's very, very top heavy, especially on the back section. Watch for that because he'll keep wanting to fall over this way. Now his hand assembly is interesting because you can make him grasp certain weapons. So if you wanted to, you can have him hold some of your newer weapons, but it's not by any means a 5mm port for the hands. There are a lot of 5mm ports on the figure and 5mm pegs, but not necessarily for the hands, not that way anyway. But there are also places where you, on his hand, like right here, you can place effect parts because of the 5mm port. So there you go, if you wanted to put any interesting effects parts. Now in terms of the weapon, his weapon is actually a transformable weapon. So if you have it transformed this way, then it's a Gatling gun. And there are square pegs on this side which plug onto the left side of your Ultra Magnus. So you're gonna want to make sure that the red piece is not hitting the wheel section. So connect it like this. Once you have it connected to his essentially armpit, you can just go ahead and have him pretend to hold it, I suppose. And that's his Gatling gun mode. Now, since it's pressing that particular button, I'm not going to be activating any sounds or anything because I just don't do that with my Transformers figures. But there will be special sounds for that if you did have your battery on. Now you can change the mode of the gun. So if you remove it, so essentially all you need to do is reverse everything. So turn this around. Move this downward. And now it's kind of like a little bit of a rail gun, claw gun, whichever way you want to call it. Now again, make sure that this red piece is off to the other side. And then those circular pegs plug into the hole on the armpit. Holes on the armpit, rather. And same thing. You can just have him pretend to hold the weapon. And then just gonna match the shape of the pegs to the holes on the armpit. Then place them there. Although this is not super aesthetically pleasing, to be honest. So I'm not super a fan of it. But yes, you can do it. And you can do it a few other ways. Like you can just literally just play with that gun and move it around. It's modular enough that you can transform it in different ways, make it into different weapons. But to be honest, other than being a gun, it's not super interesting. But yeah, you can do that. But one of my favorite modes, I think, for this that isn't really covered in the instructions is that it can turn into a staff. And the reason I like that is because it's the closest thing that you can have to a hammer for Ultra Magnus. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, one of the other things that you can do with this is have a target sight visible. So if you're gonna be using it as a gun, you can do that. Now, there's 5mm ports here. So if you wanted to, you can just connect it to the peg on the side. Also use this hole because there's a 5mm port on his finger. Sorry, 5mm peg. So you can display it in that way, that manner. That's my preferred version. It's not a hammer by any means, but you know, it's close enough to be a giant, you know, thing that he can whack people with. So that's why I like that version. I don't really understand the purpose of these red things, to be honest. If you guys know, just let me know in the comments, I guess. But for the most part, I see them as weird assemblies. Anyway, so there you go with the figure itself. So let's go ahead and transform him into alt mode. So first off, I'm gonna set him off to the side. I'm gonna take care of this. Okay, you're gonna wanna make sure that the sides are going the same way. Okay, now this particular assembly, we can do so many things with this in alt mode, and I'll show you later. There's a particular favorite of mine that makes him look a lot closer to regular Ultra Magnus. Because to be honest with you, in car carrier mode, he's a lot more Ultra Magnus than he is now. So we're gonna go ahead and separate the legs first. So just go ahead and grab the legs, take them off. Okay. Set them off to the side here. Okay, there's a bit of finagling you're gonna need to do with this back section over here. So flip this around and you're gonna wanna just move the wing parts back. It's not a natural transformation because you're gonna wanna move the soft rubber parts around, but it is what it is. And then this wing section over here has a nice hexagonal shape. You can just put those together and there you have them. Okay. And then that essentially is your top part of the cab section. Now, you can also take this chest part, and some people, what they do is they turn this head and hide it under here. But technically speaking, you don't have to do that. And just to show you, I'm going to leave it there. Now this whole assembly now will start to make sense. The double jointedness here. You're gonna want to fold this out and inward, and then as you can see, the wheel section just obviously would want to go this way. It's very, very intuitive that way. So you'll have a 5mm peg here, a 5mm peg hole over here on the other end. You're just gonna want to align those and do the same thing for the other side. So expose the wheel section. And then there's a 5mm peg here and a hole here. You just need to connect these two again. And then essentially same thing. And it's just gonna be one whole solid part. And then you're just gonna wanna readjust this whole section here so that it's aligned properly. So there you have your cab. Now, what you're gonna wanna do is fold these inward. Same thing with this side. And then this section, this chrome grille, you're going to want to slide it downward, accordion it downward, and there's a notch here which will connect to this rectangular peg. Just go ahead and snap that on and snap that on, and now you have your cab mode. So the cab mode is nice because, you know, it just looks like a cute little truck, but there's a section up top that you can actually put cars on top of if you wanted to do so. And you'll see what it's for later because it actually forms part of the larger trailer. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take the leg assemblies and we're going to make it so that it's the trailer. So what we're gonna do is, now that you have your leg here, unfold this and then bring this outward, because you're going to want to take this part and fold it in. Then just basically flip it around, and this section will peg onto this part. And that's pretty much it for that section. You do exactly the same thing on the other side really quickly. So unpeg it. Oh, sorry. Peg it back in this way. And there you have it. Now, you're also going to want to flip, to turn these parts around, because these will basically act as a guard for the ramp doors and the actual ramp. So you're going to bring these sections up and you're going to plug them on here. Do the same thing here. So now that you have both sides, you're going to want to turn this part inward. So just go ahead and do that. Do the same thing on the other side. Or don't, but it's just cleaner if you do it that way. And then you have peg and notch and peg and notch, and all you need to do is match these two together, and now you have your trailer. Very, very easy. Now this next part is a little bit finicky. So you take your cab mode, and I've seen people do this different ways, but I find the best way for me is to have his hands open on the back side, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and go forward with this. Okay, leave the thumb inward. Okay, that's something I forgot to mention. Connect this part to this peg hole here. It's best to support it with a table. It's not the most stable connection, but there's another set of pegs that you're gonna want to find here inside. You're gonna want to peg the trailer on there just to make it extra stable. Once you're done, you can bring this whole section down, and just you'll want to align these parts because they can misalign very easily. Not like they're gonna break or anything, but it's not gonna be the most flush. So just use your fingers to make sure they align. And then what's gonna happen is these peg holes are just gonna support the end of these ramps, so you have some stability there. And there you have the car carrier mode. Now for the car carrier mode, I want to say, while it doesn't look like Ultra Magnus, it is a car carrier, and there's not a lot of car carriers in the world of Transformers. It's mostly an Ultra Magnus thing, so you know, forgivable. Plus there's a white cab. The white cab was not in any way visible in the robot mode. At least it's here. Now what can you do with these gun things? In the instructions and the box art, what they have is that you have your missiles facing outwards and the pegs facing inwards. So what you're gonna want to do is find the peg holes and just align them here. So honestly, it's already starting to remind me a lot more of Ultra Magnus because of this assembly. Okay, there you go. So that's pretty much it. So of course, if I press these, I get missile action. Now if I disconnect these, a lot of people also like to do it an alternate way, where they have these connected at the back. Well, you can do it however way you want, as long as you make sure that your peg holes are here so that you can have access to this section right here. So there's pegs on the back. Do the same thing. Okay, so I'm gonna disconnect these, but because I want to show you guys what my favorite look is, and it's neither of these two. What I like to do is I like to expose the pegs. So I'm gonna expose the pegs like this, and I'm gonna place them front-wise as well. And the reason for that is it kind of recalls the the shoulder launcher, so to speak, of Ultra Magnus, and it gives me that vibe. It looks like Ultra Magnus somehow from G1. That's why I like putting it there. And having these assemblies here doesn't really hinder all your cars. Like for example, I have Legends RC here, and she actually does fine. She can still work with this assembly on top. Let's play around with a ramp. So I can either put cars by just, you know, popping them in the old-fashioned way. So that's Studio Series Hot Rod. Or I can use the ramp. So the cool thing about this is I can also use the ramp from the back. So if I disengage this section, it's actually a really nicely molded ramp, as you can see. And I can just simply pull out the cars as such. And it works really nicely. But essentially, it functions as a full car carrier. It can carry up to 3 deluxe cars, as you can see here. So a lot of people have been talking about how the new Siege Ultra Magnus is taking a lot of design cues from robots In Disguise Ultra Magnus, and I just wanted to clarify that when people say that, they're not talking about the robot mode, as you can see here. They look like 2 different figures entirely. This is, you know, its own thing, while the Siege version is very much a modern G1 inspired look. However, once we get to alt mode, that's when it becomes very obvious what the design cues of the Siege version is. In fact, if I'm gonna just compare, as you can see, the angular shape of the cab is pretty much the same. You have the heavy bumper here, although the wheel placement is a little different. And you can also see that while not 100% the same, the car carrier modes are pretty much giving you the same vibe. You know, they're very grid-like. They're more realistic. It even has the ladders here on the side. Okay, and also the trapezoidal shapes over here. The shapes over here are also very similar. So yeah, it's very obvious what they were going for when it comes to which design they were going for the alt mode. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the alt mode is that the wheels are actual rubber tires, as you can see here, and there are a lot of connection ports that you can use. So as you can see, you have a peg here, peg holes here, another peg here. So multiple places where you can actually put more weapons if you wanted to. So you have a 5mm port here. I'm gonna take the siege gun and I'm gonna install it there. And as you can see, that works. If I wanted to use one of these pegs, I can also do that. And I can attach additional weapons as I see fit. So essentially you can really soup this up. Although this one's a little loose on either side. So, you know, there are certain 5mm pegs that just won't work. But the rest, you know, you can use them as you see fit. So I'm gonna end this video in car mode because that's really the strongest of the 2 modes, I would say. And for me, personally, I love collecting Chug Scale. By Chug, I mean Classics, Henkei, Universe, Generations, Scale, alt modes. This one's a little bigger, but it does manage to go really nicely with your other figures. So for example, here's Alternity Ultra Magnus, which is essentially a deluxe. Here's your Studio Series 86 Hot Rod, which is also the size-wise a deluxe size. So he scales really nicely with all of them, even if he's a little larger than most of your trucks. But like I said, he will fit really nicely with any collection, and the most fun you will have with him, I would say, is in this car carrier mode. So let me know what your thoughts are on Robots in Disguise Ultra Magnus, and if you own one and if you plan to get one, let me know in the comments below. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at x_Paco. Till next time, this has been X's Toy Universe.